They don't want you to know this. For thousands of years, while entire civilizations collapsed, while empires burned and currencies turned to ash, one group of people quietly kept getting wealthier, generation after generation, century after century. Not because they were lucky, not because they had connections, but because they followed a system, an ancient, battle-tested system for building wealth through property that has been passed down in hushed tones, written between the lines of sacred texts and practiced in silence by some of the most financially successful families on earth. I'm talking about the Jewish approach to real estate, and today I'm going to show you exactly how it works. The Torah was a real estate manual. Most people read the Torah as a spiritual book, and it is. But if you read it through the eyes of a wealth builder, something extraordinary jumps off the page. From the very beginning, God's first gift to mankind was not gold, it was not silver. It was not a business, it was land. The Garden of Eden was property, the Promised Land was property. The instructions given to the tribes of Israel were not just spiritual boundaries, they were property deeds. Every tribe received an allocation of land. Every family within that tribe received their portion. And the Torah made it crystal clear that land was never to be permanently lost. This is not coincidence. This is a philosophy, a worldview baked into the foundation of Jewish civilization that says land is the bedrock of all lasting wealth. The rabbis understood something that modern financial advisors are only beginning to rediscover. Paper burns, gold can be seized, businesses can fail overnight, but land, properly acquired, properly managed, and properly passed down, is the one asset that has never, in the entire history of human civilization, gone to zero. The Yovel principle, why Jews never permanently lost their land. In Leviticus, God commands something remarkable. Every 50 years, in what is called the Yovel, the Jubilee year, all land that had been sold was to be returned to its original family. No exceptions. Now, on the surface, this sounds like bad news for buyers, but the rabbis saw something deeper in this law. They saw a principle that should govern every real estate transaction you ever make. The principle is this: you never truly sell land, you only lease it. Think about what this does to your mindset. If you understand that land is not something to be casually flipped or liquidated the moment the market moves, you begin to hold it differently. You stop making emotional decisions. You stop panic selling when the news says a crash is coming. You start thinking in decades, not months. You start thinking about what this asset will be worth, not for you, but for your children and your children's children. The wealthiest Jewish families in the world, the Rothschilds, the Reichmanns, countless others, did not build their fortunes by chasing trends. They built them by acquiring real property and holding it across generations with the patience of people who believed at the cellular level that land was sacred and time was their greatest ally. The three-part wealth formula hidden in Jewish law. The Talmud, the great rabbinical text that expands on Torah law, contains a piece of financial advice so powerful that modern portfolio managers charge thousands of dollars to tell you the same thing. It is found in Tractat Bava Metzia, and it says this: a man should always divide his wealth into three parts, 1/3 in land, 1/3 in business, and 1/3 kept liquid. Read that again. 1/3 in land, 1/3 in business, 1/3 in cash. This is the original diversification strategy, written over 1,500 years ago. And real estate sits at the very top of the list, not as an afterthought, not as one option among many, but as the first pillar of every serious wealth-building plan. Why land first? Because land produces income while you sleep. Because land appreciates while you go about your life. Because land, unlike a business, does not require your daily presence to survive. The rabbis understood the power of passive income centuries before Robert Kiyosaki wrote a single word. But here is the part most people miss. The Talmudic formula is not just about what to own. It is about the sequence of thinking. Land comes first because it provides the stability that allows your business to take risks. And business comes second because it generates the surplus capital that replenishes your liquid reserves. And liquid reserves come last because they exist not for spending, but for seizing opportunity when it appears. In other words, your real estate is not just an investment. It is the foundation that makes every other part of your financial life possible. How Jewish merchants built empires. From a single room throughout medieval Europe, Jewish communities were systematically banned from owning farmland. It was one of the most vicious economic attacks in history, designed to keep an entire people permanently poor and permanently dependent. It did not work. Why? Because the rabbis pivoted. They turned to urban property. They acquired buildings in the cities where they were permitted to live. They rented rooms to other merchants. They used those rental incomes to fund trading operations. They used those trading profits to acquire more buildings. And over generations, while the people who banned them from farmland watched their own rural estates crumble under debt and mismanagement, Jewish families were quietly building multi-generational urban real estate portfolios that would outlast kingdoms. This is the lesson. It is not about what property you start with. It is about starting. It is about acquiring one asset, extracting income from that asset, and using that income to acquire the next one. The rabbis called this hamshacha, the act of pulling wealth forward continuously from one generation to the next. You do not need $1 million to begin. You need one door, one unit, one property that generates even a modest monthly surplus, because that surplus is the seed of everything that follows. The concept of Chazakah, possession as power. There is a legal concept in Jewish law called Chazakah. It refers to the establishment of rightful ownership through continuous, uninterrupted possession and use of a property. Under traditional Jewish law, if you occupied and actively used a property for 3 years, your claim to that property became legally presumed and nearly unassailable. But beyond its legal application, Chazakah became a mindset, an attitude toward property that said, being present, being active, being engaged with your assets is itself a form of power. The wealthiest real estate operators in Jewish history were never absentee landlords who collected checks and forgot about their buildings. They walked their properties. They knew their tenants. They reinvested in their assets. They understood that a maintained property grows in value while a neglected one decays, and that the discipline of active stewardship is what separates a family that builds a dynasty from one that fritters away its inheritance in a single generation. This is why, to this day, successful Jewish real estate families like the Lefracks in New York, the Milsteins, the Roses, these are not passive investors, they are operators. They are builders. They treat every property as a living asset that responds to attention and withers under neglect. The power of the community pool, how Jews funded real estate together. One of the most overlooked strategies in Jewish wealth-building history is the concept of the Kehilla, the community. In Jewish tradition, the community was not just a social structure. It was an economic unit. When an individual in the community identified a property opportunity but lacked the full capital to act alone, he did not go to a bank. He went to the elders. A pool of community investors would fund the acquisition. Profits would be distributed, risk would be shared, and the entire community moved forward together. This is syndication. This is the partnership model. This is the exact structure that today's most successful real estate developers use to acquire hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property with relatively little personal capital. The rabbis understood something profound. Individual wealth has a ceiling, but collective wealth is limitless. One man can buy one building. 10 men pooling their resources can buy 10 buildings. And the man who organizes the pool, who brings the deal, who manages the asset, he earns not just his share of the profits, but a premium for his expertise and his leadership. If you are sitting here without enough capital to buy the property you want, stop thinking like an individual. Start thinking like a Kehilla. Find partners, present deals, structure agreements. The deal is the skill. The capital will follow. Leave nothing to chance. The Jewish approach to inheritance. Perhaps the most powerful and most ignored dimension of Jewish real estate wealth is what happens after the acquisition. What happens when you die? Jewish law is extraordinarily specific about inheritance. Property was not divided equally among all children and scattered to the wind. It was managed as a unit, preserved as an asset, and passed to those who had demonstrated the knowledge and discipline to continue growing it. The goal was never to give each child a piece of the pie. The goal was to keep the pie whole, keep it growing, and teach every member of the next generation how to bake a bigger one. This multi-generational thinking is the single greatest differentiator between families that accumulate wealth for one lifetime and families that build dynasties across centuries. Your property is not just an investment for you. It is infrastructure for your children. It is leverage for your grandchildren. Every decision you make about maintenance, financing, tenant selection, and reinvestment carries consequences not just for your bank account today, but for your family's position in the world 20, 30, 50 years from now. The rabbi does not ask, "What is this property worth today?" The rabbi asks, "What will this property mean to my family in 100 years?" The secret they never taught you. Here is the truth that the wealthiest Jewish families have known for 3,000 years. The truth that is hiding in plain sight in texts that most people have never read. Real estate is not an investment strategy. It is a civilization strategy. It is how you convert the labor of one generation into security for the next. It is how you transform income into legacy. It is how ordinary people who started with nothing, who were banned from certain industries, who were persecuted across continents, who survived things that should have destroyed them. It is how those people kept rising, not because they were smarter, not because they were luckier, but because they followed a system, a patient, disciplined, community-backed, multi-generational system built on the foundation of one simple belief: own the land, hold the land, build on the land, pass it on. That system is available to you right now. The only question is whether you are ready to use it.